In the shadowed lands where the realm of Folkyr meets the ashen plains of the orcish territories, Ironheart Keep stood as a bastion of human defiance. Its weathered stone walls, etched with runes of power and stained with the blood of countless battles, had long been a thorn in the side of the savage clans. But on this night, as the waning moon cast an eerie glow over the battlefield, the air thrummed with an ominous energy that spoke of impending doom. Groknak the Younger, chieftain of the Skullcrusher clan and descendant of the legendary Groknak the Skullcrusher, stood atop a ridge overlooking Ironheart Keep. His massive frame, corded with muscles and adorned with trophy bones, cut an imposing silhouette against the starlit sky. Around him gathered the leaders of the other great clans, Zarthol of the Shadow Strikes, Morghala of the Flame Reavers, Throckgar of the Iron Hides, and Groknak of the World Breakers. For the first time in generations, the 5 great clans had united under a single banner. The ancient prophecies spoke of a time when the volcanoes would speak with one voice, calling for the orcs to claim their destiny. That time, Groknak believed, had come. As he surveyed the keep below, Groknak's mind wandered to the vision that had brought him to this moment. 3 moons passed. As he meditated in the heart of an active volcano, the molten rock had spoken to him. In the bubbling magma, he had seen visions of his ancestors, Groknak the Skullcrusher, Morgera the Flame Reaver, Throck the Ironhide, Zargasha the Shadow Strike, and Grimthor the World Breaker. Their spectral forms had risen from the lava, each bestowing upon him a fragment of their legendary might. The time has come, they had intoned in unison, their voices like the rumble of an earthquake. Unite the clans. Crush the human vermin. Let the world burn, that our people may rise from the ashes. Shaking off the memory, Groknak turned to address the assembled horde. Brothers and sisters of the savage clans, his voice boomed across the gathered warriors, tonight, we write our names in the blood of our enemies. The humans cower behind their walls, thinking themselves safe. But we are the children of fire and stone. We were born in the crucibles of creation, forged in violence and chaos. Tonight, we show these weaklings the true meaning of strength. A deafening roar erupted from the orcish ranks, a cacophony of bloodlust and anticipation that shook the very earth. War drums began to pound, their thunderous rhythm matching the quickening heartbeats of the warriors. Zarthol of the Shadow Strikes, his lean frame almost invisible in the pre-dawn gloom, slithered up to Groknak's side. My scouts report that the humans are aware of our presence, he hissed, his voice barely audible above the din. They've called for reinforcements from the nearby settlements. Groknak's lips curled into a savage grin. Good. Let them come. It will save us the trouble of hunting them down later. Morghala the Flame Reavers approached next, her eyes gleaming with an inner fire. The spirits of the volcano are restless, Groknak, she said, her voice crackling like embers. They hunger for the blood of our enemies. Shall I call upon their power? The Skullcrusher chieftain nodded. Do it. Let the humans taste the fury of our birthright. As Morghala began her ritual, chanting in the ancient tongue of fire and stone, the very air around the orcish horde began to shimmer with heat. The ground trembled, and in the distance, the slumbering volcanoes that marked the border of orcish lands began to glow with an ominous red light. As the first rays of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the orcish horde surged forward like a tide of green flesh and cold steel. At the forefront, berserkers of the Skullcrusher clan charged bare-chested, their bodies covered in ritual scars and war paint. Their earth-shaking war cries sent shockwaves of terror through the human defenders atop the walls. Leading the charge was Groknak himself, his massive war hammer held high. With each step, the ground cracked beneath his feet, as if the very earth was trying to flee from his wrath. Behind him came the elite warriors of each clan, each group a deadly force in its own right. The Shadow Strikes moved like living shadows, their forms blurring and shifting in the early morning light. Armed with poison blades and throwing knives, they sought out the weak points in Ironheart's defenses. The Flame Reavers followed, their bodies wreathed in magical fire that seemed to consume everything but their own flesh. They hurled balls of liquid flame at the keep's walls, the heat so intense that it made the very air waver. The Iron Hides formed a living battering ram, their thick hides turning aside arrows and spears as if they were nothing more than bothersome insects. They carried massive shields that they used to provide cover for the more lightly armored warriors. And behind them all came the World Breakers, pushing great siege engines cobbled together from wood, stone, and scavenged metal. The ground shook with each movement of their massive war machines, promising devastation on an unprecedented scale. Alarm bells rang out from Ironheart Keep, and the garrison scrambled to man the defenses. Paladin Commander Aldrich, a grizzled veteran of countless battles against the orcs, strode along the ramparts, his presence alone bolstering the courage of his men. Aldrich's weathered face was grim as he surveyed the approaching horde. In all his years defending the border, he had never seen the orcs so united, so purposeful in their assault. A cold dread settled in the pit of his stomach, but he pushed it aside. Now was not the time for fear. "Stand fast, brothers." Aldrich's voice rang out, infused with divine power. "We are the bulwark against the darkness, the shield that protects the innocent. In the name of the primal gods, we shall not falter." As he spoke, Aldrich felt the familiar warmth of divine energy flowing through him. He raised his sword high, and it began to glow with a pure, white light. Around him, the other paladins followed suit, their blessed weapons forming a network of radiance atop the walls. Arrows rained down upon the advancing orcs, but for every green-skinned warrior that fell, 2 more took their place. The first wave crashed against the outer walls like a sea of fury, grappling hooks and crude ladders appearing as if by magic. Thrakkar's Ironhides formed the second wave, their thick skin turning aside arrows and sword blows alike. They locked their massive shields together, forming an impenetrable barrier as they advanced. Atop this mobile fortress, Worldbreaker siege engines rumbled forward, their crews working feverishly to bring their deadly payloads to bear. A thunderous crash echoed across the battlefield as the first Worldbreaker catapult unleashed its payload. A massive boulder, wreathed in flames by Flame Reaver shamans, arced through the air and slammed into the eastern tower of Ironheart Keep. Stone cracked and mortar turned to dust as the impact shook the very foundations of the fortress. Paladin Commander Aldrich stumbled, nearly losing his footing as the tower beside him began to crumble. "Shore up the eastern defenses," he bellowed, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "Priests of Aquilo, call upon the waters to douse those flames." High Priestess Alara, her robes billowing in the smoke-filled air, raised her staff to the heavens. "Great Aquilo, Lord of wind and water, hear our plea," she cried. "Send forth your cleansing rains to quench these unholy fires." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if in answer to her prayers, storm clouds began to gather overhead. A torrential downpour erupted, momentarily slowing the orcish advance as the Flame Reaver's fires sputtered and hissed. But even as the defenders allowed themselves a moment of hope, a bone-chilling war cry cut through the air. Groknak the Younger had reached the walls. With a single mighty swing of his war hammer, the orcish chieftain shattered a section of the wall that had withstood centuries of siege and storm. Stones flew like leaves in a gale, crushing unfortunate defenders and creating a breach large enough for 3 orcs to enter abreast. "Forward, my brothers!" Groknak roared, his voice carrying over the chaos of battle. "The way is open. Let none stand before the might of the savage clans." Through the widening gap poured a sea of green muscle and flashing steel. The Skullcrusher berserkers were first through the breach, their battle rage rendering them impervious to pain or fear. They fell upon the human defenders like wolves among sheep, their crude axes rising and falling in a bloody rhythm. Aldrich raised his blessed sword high, its blade glowing with divine light. "To me, paladins of Folkyr," he cried. "We make our stand here." A cadre of armored warriors rallied to their commander, forming a shining bulwark against the orcish tide. For a moment, it seemed as though they might stem the green flood. Aldrich's sword flashed like lightning, each stroke felling an orcish warrior. Beside him, the paladins called upon the powers of earth and fire, their elemental magics sowing chaos among the enemy ranks. But then a shadow fell across the battlefield, and a roar like thunder split the air. Groknak the Younger had entered the fray. The orcish chieftain towered over his kin, his massive war hammer crackling with dark energy. With each swing, paladins were sent flying, their blessed armor crumpling like parchment beneath the force of his blows. Aldrich knew that the fate of Ironheart Keep now rested on his shoulders alone. Uttering a quick prayer to the primal gods, he stepped forward to meet Groknak in single combat. "Face me, beast," Aldrich challenged, his voice carrying across the chaos of battle. "Let us end this, warrior to warrior." Groknak's lips peeled back in a feral grin, revealing rows of sharpened teeth. "Little man," he growled, "your gods have abandoned you. Embrace your death with honor, and I shall ensure your skull adorns my throne." The two champions clashed in a whirlwind of steel and sorcery. Aldrich's blessed sword met Groknak's war hammer in a shower of sparks, each impact sending shockwaves through the air. The paladin commander called upon every ounce of his training and faith, his blade leaving glowing trails of divine energy as he parried and struck. Groknak's attacks were relentless, each blow carrying the force of an avalanche. Yet Aldrich held his ground, his faith and skill allowing him to weather the onslaught. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the human champion might actually prevail. But for every blow Aldrich landed, Groknak seemed to grow stronger. The orcish chieftain's bloodlust was reaching its peak, his eyes glowing with an inner fire that spoke of his race's chaotic birth. With a roar that shook the very stones of Ironheart Keep, Groknak brought his war hammer down in an overhead strike. Aldrich raised his shield, reinforced by the blessings of the primal gods. For a heartbeat, it seemed as though it might hold. But then, with a sound like the world itself splitting apart, the shield shattered. Aldrich stumbled, his guard open for just a moment. It was all Groknak needed. The warhammer swung in a vicious arc, catching Aldrich in the side. The paladin commander's armor buckled, and he was sent flying across the courtyard, crashing into the base of a statue of Terra.